Hello, I'm Adrian Kitching. I'm the Managing Director of Crompton Lamps, and today I'm going to be talking about facilitating the transition from traditional light sources to LED. We're going to be focusing on the control technologies that can be used and how it can be a benefit to smart lighting applications. As I probably don't need to reintroduce myself. I'm Adrian Kitching. I'm the MD of Crompton Lamps. So we're a traditional lighting company that's been a manufacturer and is now a sourcer of products, which is indicative of most of the lighting industry. It's fair to say well over 90% of certainly lamps, whether it's a lamp or a bulb, depending on your terminology, does come from China. And I've seen an awful lot of changes over the years, really, to try and understand about the technology and how these things are actually made. So what I'd like to do this morning is just talk a little bit about the transition to LED lighting, touch on some of the areas in terms of what the future is. I'd like to give you a little bit of information about the general state of the lighting market, how big it is, what some of the trends are, what some of the expectations are. Really to talk about the Internet of Things and connected smart lighting. What are some of the drivers there? We talked about the 60-watt lamp earlier. I'd like to mention something and come back to that a little bit. But just to whet your appetite, I think a lot of that has got down to do with colour and how we perceive light. So if we want people to adopt light and use it a lot better, then we have to make that light usable and controllable. So to start with, I thought I'd kill you with a graph. Basically, the EU and the lighting market say that all light bulbs will be redundant by 2020 and 2025, so there won't be any light bulbs left. Some speakers this morning mentioned about integrated fittings being the way forward, and that certainly is a massive trend. The lamps market is half the size of the fittings market. The lamps market was traditionally run by the big 4 or 5 manufacturers. 3 of those now, Philips, Osram and GE, have split their businesses in half and hived off the traditional bit of the business and left the LED bit, because there are tremendous legacy costs of getting rid of old-fashioned factories. So if they've done it, they clearly don't want to go back to that type of technology. But also on the flip side, the actual cost of making an LED is coming down dramatically. Some of the components are changing. You might buy a lamp now where you tap it and you think it's got a glass cover, and it's not glass. There are glass-like materials that are used to try and fool you. Any LED, typically under 7 watts now, won't have any metal. It won't have a heatsink in it. Because thermal plastics, in terms of the materials that they can use, dissipate that heat. We're going back to filling lamps with gas so that the heat transmits through the gas, touches the wall and then leaves out. So lamps made today are very, very different from lamps made 2 years ago and made 5 years ago. And who knows where that technology is going to go. So we'll touch on that a little bit as well. But you can see from here, really, this has been the key driver. Good old Swan or Edison, depending on who you believe in, developed that lamp. Incandescent sales have halved. So from an EU point of view, tick in the box, job done. Be interesting to see if heating sales have gone up exactly the opposite, because as we said earlier, there's a lot of people with cold houses now. LFL is linear fluorescent lamps, so they're starting to fade off now. T12 lamps were banned, T8 lamps are being reduced. You can now get an LED tube that's about half the power of a traditional fluorescent lamp. Does that mean you can't control it if you were running it on Dali and things? No, you can still do that, and we'll talk about some of the older lamp technologies and the challenges really of controlling them with modern controls. In terms of the fixture market, as I said, it's about double at the moment in terms of the lamp market, but it's still really only 72% of it will be LED. So there's more LED fixtures out there than there are traditional fixtures at the moment, and that is a trend that is rapidly sort of developing. In terms of Smart lighting. Steve was talking about wired and wireless connections. Wireless, I think we tend to assume is more residential. It's easier to retrofit. The wired, possibly more commercial. You need, a qualified electrician to actually put that in for you. But there is a bit of crossover between the two. But you can see they are actually suggesting that that market is going to grow dramatically. Interestingly, a lot of it from Europe. So, we are leading the world in a lot of respects in our adoption of new technology and smart lighting. I mentioned I went to the CES show in Las Vegas. The most bizarre thing I saw was actually a home automation system in America where you can connect your security to a shotgun. So if someone comes into your garden, it fires off a round at them, which is probably taking it a little bit too far. Although it might be necessary before very long, who knows? This is a brilliant graph. Please ignore everything apart from the yellow bit. And it's really just to give you an idea. This is the LIA, so this is the Lighting Industry Association, and all the members submit their sales and they get back a summary total. And basically what it was saying is that 2% in February 14, 2% of the total was LED, and now it's 16%. So it just gives you an idea really, and by every other product sector as well. So this will be in the pack afterwards if you want to have a look at any particular sector. But by value, 13% of sales is LED, and now 29%. So of all the members that submit their sales data to the Lighting Association, last month, or January 17, nearly 30% of those sales were LED. You've probably all, hopefully, got an LED in your own house. I'm not going to ask anybody to put their hand up if they haven't. But interestingly, what would be your rough idea of a percentage? What's the adoption of LED in the UK, do you think, as a percentage? In housing, residential. Of all the sockets changed, 50%, 80%, 5%? Yeah, it's nearly 20, but we all talk about LED as being everywhere. We assume it's everywhere, and the reality is it isn't. In a super building like this, yes, and a new building, but actually, at your nana's house or in council properties, have all these lamps been changed? No. So there is still a great deal of potential. In terms of the LED market itself, the UK is still third. I'm a Leeds fan, I'm not very good with league tables. So the United States is still top, and Germany, and then the UK. So we're still, as I said earlier, we are up there in terms of desire to actually use LEDs and move that forward. Where do we buy them from? Traditionally supermarkets. So, B&Q, Tesco's, Asda, they used to have branded products in there. One or two of them still do, but the majority now direct import LEDs and give them to us so that we're going around and shopping. I remember seeing LEDs at €39, at £40, in supermarkets, with the idea that as you tootled around with your trolley, you would suddenly pick up a lamp and throw it in. No chance. But it is starting to happen now. But are those guys buying the best value product that's out there with the best efficacy? No. They're saying there's a £2.99 price point, less 40% margin, less the VAT. I need to buy it for X. What can we buy for that that's good, that's bright? They don't even know how many lumens are in that lamp. So yes, a lot of people are going to DIY stores to buy those products, but I would perhaps suggest that the products in those stores aren't the best products or the current ones that are out there. And certainly when we're talking about smart lighting, that is something that is evolving. Philips Hue, they got started really early on. That's been the biggest sort of lamp that's been sold out there in the market. Allows you to change your colours, open the door for lots of different things to follow. Interestingly, IKEA are about to launch at the end of March in Europe smart lighting products. So lamps, GU10s, GU10s for $16, which, you know, in terms of other price points that are out there at the moment, is what IKEA do best. They make it affordable. So it will be a really interesting year to see how that takes on and whether that's possible, and whether that helps make it a little bit more interesting. What are some of the barriers for smart lighting? Well, clearly, some of my colleagues this morning touched on security, being able to control products. You know, there are Bluetooth lamps out there now, not BLE, but just standard Bluetooth lamps. And if I happen to be walking past Stephen's house, I can connect to his lamps and turn his lamp on. Is that the end of the world? No. But if he works for the Bank of England and I can get on his network at some point, maybe it is. So I think security is an issue. And certainly, you know, from the research that's out there, cost prices, various different protocols, these are all aspects that other colleagues have touched on this morning as well. What makes it interesting for consumers is really where I think some of the smart tech is driven from the youngsters. I'm reliably informed young kids now are called Generation Z. It was an American that told me that, so I'll stick with Z. But he was the guy who invented Alexa, and I saw him do a presentation a few weeks ago in Amsterdam. And he showed a video of a little walkway, and all the people that were walking past, some were on the phones and doing various different, the kids were walking past and they know how to swipe. And Andrew, you've a granddaughter, Alexa, I'm sure she can use an iPad. Right, maybe, but give it a week. It's that type of technology. So if we're specifying buildings for people to work in when they're working in a modern way, we have to maybe try and think what they want rather than what we know is best and how we would wire and set up a building for today's use. Should have one eye on tomorrow's people and how they're going to be running the businesses. We talked about affordability. This is real data. In 2009, I happily, with an eye patch on, sold a GU10 for £17. Now I'm lucky if I get two for them. And it's a better lamp. It's nearly twice as bright, lasts a lot longer. It's a much better lamp. How is that possible? Just by scale and by adoption. GE used to make incandescent lamps. I've visited the factories in Hungary. They had a 40-watt BC line. You put sand in at one end, lamps came out the other end. It ran 24/7, 365, made 100 million lamps a year. That's gone. Some of that machinery is now being adopted and modified to use LED stems, as has halogen equipment. But the majority of lamps, and I tell you from a manufacturing point of view, the majority of LED lamps are still handmade. There's very little automation because there isn't the volume, even though there are mind-boggling volumes out there, but it's just starting to come now. So the factory that makes the IKEA lamps, I went round a fortnight ago, and they're making 300,000 LED filaments a day to go into lamps. So 2 guys run that line. So in terms of taking cost out and getting it to the point where can an LED lamp ever be the same price as an incandescent lamp? Probably it can, by automation and by design. You see there on the left of the screen the typical components of an LED lamp, the driver being an integral part of that. As Stephen said earlier, we take 240 volt round the house, we put it into a lamp socket and then put a driver in there to take it down to DC, because all LEDs run on DC. Why do we do that? That's crazy. So manufacturers have been looking, and you see, 32 components traditionally, even only last year going into the board, 26 this year, and now 12. But that will only take 10% cost out of the board. So, the technology is changing. We want more and more, but we want to pay less and less. So we have to try and keep up a little bit. This technology is called driver on board. So you've got the little yellow LED chips, or you've got the blue LED chips, but with a yellow phosphor coating, and an integrated driver on there. Incidentally, most fittings and most lamps only run on about half the power. So if there's a 7-watt lamp, you'll probably have 14 watts worth of LEDs inside it. And one of the reasons that manufacturers can achieve a longer life is to only run them at half their power. So if you have less and less components and you've got less sophisticated drivers, then that potentially could be an issue going forward, certainly residentially. I know Stuart this morning was talking about emergency products being an issue, and that controllability, and I'll touch on Dali in a moment. But really, if we're dumbing down the products, how do we really control that going forward? So there's a significant number of questions. Smart home categories, there's been a lot of research around. A lot of my colleagues this morning have shared information with you. I think we are seeing lighting, heating, appliances, locks. Interestingly, a colleague I spoke to, they were developing smart locks, but they couldn't get the insurance company to sign off on it. They said, if there's a fault and that door's open, we're not going to be liable for that house being burgled. So there are other challenges that you might think, well, the product side of it, can we actually make a product that can do that? Yes, we can, but industry is actually stopping that coming to market without some financial caveats. Steve mentioned that the ECA had done a survey of electrical contractors as well. This is another extract from another survey of smart lighting, and it asked some electrical contractors what was being installed. And you can see the number one item was all-in-one downlighters, which seems to be the vast majority of what product people are rushing to do now. Take a twin 26-watt PLC lamp out, put in a flat opal diffuser that's rubbish, that's got no glare control, but it's just easier because it's the same size hole. I would suggest if you spent £100 specifying a Thorn, Zumtobel, Philips fixture, why not put a retrofit lamp into it rather than take that whole fitting out that's perfectly capable of lasting for another 10 years? Or maybe connecting it to a Kasambi module so you can do smart control and retrofit that. Kasambi have matchbox size controllers that can go into any circuit and you can make it a smart circuit. They also, because they were the guys from Nokia, they make a small SIM size one. So, you can put a small SIM now and a carrier into a fitting and connect to that and make it a smart fitting. So the technology is changing quite dramatically, and some of these guys are being asked to use it. They were also asked then, do you install smart lighting? And 56% said often. But look, different coloured lighting, sensor connected, smartphone control. So only 6% of people were talking about the frequency in terms of smart control. So yes, people still want it. People still want it, but it's an evolving and an emerging technology, and I don't think there is really a one-size-fits-all issue yet. Is some of that driven by manufacturers? Possibly. This is a chart I was presented with when I joined Crompton. It said, right, are you covered legally? Have you got patents and have you got IP protection? And I was given this chart to show all these people that make LED chips, that make phosphor, and say, well, you've got to have licensing agreement with all these guys or else you're going to get sued. So why are zillions of people making LED lamps and not being sued? I certainly, we're members of the LIA. We comply to British standards and IEC standards, and we're a responsible manufacturer. There's nothing to stop any of you guys going to China, talking to a factory saying, I want to buy 1 million GU10 lamps. Does it have ERP? Yes. Buying them and bringing them into the UK. And people are doing that. So as an industry, we do need to step up now. We do need more control, particularly as smart lighting evolves. There are more and more entrants coming in. As I mentioned with With IKEA joining the smart lighting area, hopefully that will make it a little bit more affordable. RGBW, where you can have red, blue, green, and then white options, is probably the next really good, significant development for lighting. Because, you know, an incandescent lamp, you take your 100-watt lamp, you dim it down to 10%. Yes, you're only putting 24 volts into it and you're running electricity through a coil, but actually you're changing the colour, so you're not just dimming the output. All dimmable LEDs just dim the intensity, they don't change the colour. So if we can fix that and we can make it so that you can have an LED lamp that's as bright as the one that your Aunt Nellie wanted and changes colour and responds in the same way that you're used to, then hopefully there won't be a need to go back to more inefficient light sources. And that is on the verge now of being available. But how do we do that? And you're right, you know, Alexa, people like that, Google, Amazon have come into the market, and they are the guys that are deciding what's, you know, the younger generation want, that's forcing changes onto everybody else that ultimately will become adopted. Because, you know, it just moves very, very quickly. But they're not interested in a system of Dali ballasts that somebody specified 20 years ago and put into a building, you know, and 73% of all buildings being smart now. Well, probably quite a lot of buildings are smart anyway because of their Dali control. You know, Dali isn't addressable. You can talk to any individual lighting unit. There are Dali Bluetooth or Dali Zigbee hybrid ballasts. There's all sorts of things being developed and coming onto the market. But I think in essence, you don't have to upgrade to LED just to be able to do smart lighting. You can use those traditional light sources. You know, fluorescent lamps, incandescent, discharge and halogen will all work still, and you can be controlled, because in essence we were talking about protocols and software. You send in a signal to somewhere to say turn me on or turn me off or dim me to a certain level. You can do that with all those light sources. The only issue is perhaps discharge, where obviously a metal halide lamp or a low pressure sodium lamp needs, you know, 7 or 8 minutes to warm up. Once it's running, you can monitor it, but to turn it on you need a little bit of time. But we've had photocells on street lighting columns for years. You know, there's only I think 15 local authorities that have swapped to LED out of the 50 odd. So there's still an awful lot of LED street lighting to be installed in the UK that you'll see coming along. You know, maybe discharge lamps will disappear from there. They come under ERP now as well. They have to have a certain energy rating from April this year. So that will start to sort of move through a little bit. In terms of language, I don't profess to be an expert in various different languages, but I do know a little bit. But dot is a new one on me. I discovered that last week, and that's a new protocol. Zigbee, Bluetooth, Z-Wave, ULE, we talked about those earlier. Smart meters, it's my understanding that the smart meters will be Zigbee controlled. So, you know, you can connect from your phone to all these different sort of sectors, but do they talk to one another? You know, they use mesh networks, and there's an awful lot of systems integrators that probably will understand this a little bit better. I'm a simple guy. I just want to be able to know that if I can connect something in my house, is it going to be nice and simple? Or am I going to have to get a commissioning engineer to come back and say, could you turn the lights down in the bathroom, please, for me? Oops, sorry, I went too far. In terms of the actual network and how they work, you know, there are physical layers and routing layers. I won't dwindle on this too long, but this gives you a little explanation of how some of those systems will sort of sit together. The network architecture, Stuart was talking about the cloud earlier on. A lot of lighting is used for the cloud. A lot of those products will connect into that environment, but how do we actually do it? And what is the benefit of it all? These guys didn't care when they came into the market. Netflix, you know, put Blockbuster out of business. Is there going to be anybody that comes along for smart lighting to do that? Don't know. You know, Hive make LED lamps. They're not a time-served apprentice manufacturing company. You know, there are router companies that are making lamps. There are electronics companies making lamps, and quite happily so. It's good competition. But there are guys that come into any particular market and disrupt these things. You know, Kodak, Apple, there's always been disruptors. So as we get to that point where it's mass market, what is going to happen next? You know, every single LED chip that you use in lighting comes from the mobile phone industry. If they hadn't have developed iPhones and come up with those chips and thrown billions of dollars at it to research how to make them smaller, we wouldn't have LED lamps now. So, you know, are those guys just going to sit back, or are they going to do anything else? Don't know. What is the future going to look like? Yes, it's very nice if you can do everything with Alexa or with various different options. The IFTTT, or how many ever T's it's got, the if this then that generation of once I open my door I want a magnetic lock to trigger my lights, that's quite handy. It's probably more useful in a nursing home, perhaps. So maybe we should think about smart lighting by application. You know, elderly people getting out of bed, triggering a PIR, turning the lights on so that they don't fall. Let's maybe try and think of the applications rather than, oh, can I turn it on from my phone? Because my granny's not going to lie in bed and turn the lights on from a phone. But she could still benefit from different types of applications. Yep. Whatever happens going forward, whatever products you choose, they've got to be interoperable. They've got to play well with one another, whether it be cameras or whatever products. This was something I mentioned, the humble light bulb earlier, dim to warm or sunset dimming. This type of technology is out there now, but it's not mainstream. I would certainly see maybe in 2 years' time, every Crompton lamp that we sell will be dim to warm as standard. So that you start off at 2800 Kelvin, and as you dim the lamp down, you change the colour temperature. So you get down to 2200, possibly down as far as 1800 Kelvin. And that then is the perfect GLS replacement lamp, because that will change the colour. And lighting is all about ambience. It's nice that we've got light and dark. You don't need 1,000 lux everywhere. That's McDonald's. They want you in. They put plastic chairs in there to get you out of there as fast as they can. They make it too bright. If we're in a nice environment, have the ambience. Use a good lighting designer, whether that's residential or whether that's a commercial space. MEMs, you know, microscale devices that will look at electrical and mechanical devices together. So, you know, locks, doors, all these components. There's an awful lot of evolving technology. All the other presenters this morning talked about lease lighting and pay as you go. I'm no different. It could potentially be the way forward. Finance is very interesting from a lighting point of view now. People say, oh yeah, I want to change to LED, but I'm not paying for it. Can I give you the money back out of the energy saving? Well, no, but other lighting companies do that, and it is an issue. But will we pay for it on a lease basis going forward? Possibly. You know, we give people free trials now for things. We then upgrade them. We then say, oh, there's a new service. You know, if I've got a jogging app and it keeps reminding me I can have a coach for £2 a month. Well, I don't need a coach to tell me I'm out of breath, but I might do. And then it's into that subscription and how you renew the subscriptions. But what is the point of it all? You have to connect. Why bother? I think generally because it's our duty to try and look at that. Artificial intelligence, I think, for me personally, is one of the great untapped areas yet. It is going to get a lot stronger. People like Alexa, when you can do a little bit more, when you can visualize and actually look at the lighting and say, that lamp there, I want to be able to dim that from my mind to the lamp. Who knows what's going to be possible in the future. These little guys are, that's an LED chip, and it takes 28 days to grow them. They're not shelled like peas. They grow, they're on a substrate, they're polished, and there's 90 odd different ways that they can fail without you looking at them. So if you do have an LED, treat it gently. Thank you very much.